REIL is a network of individuals, all of whom are committed to seeing more renewable energy, more energy efficiency, more sustainable approaches to energy and related issues. The individuals have come together over the years through a variety of connections, and for the last 5 or 6 have met at least once a year in person. Each member of the network knows something quite deeply, whether that's energy generation technology or whether that's energy policy or finance or all sorts of different angles.
So being able to have all those experts in the room in a very safe environment to see whether they collectively, by sharing their ideas, what they're thinking on, what they're working on, whether you can come up with new solutions, new opportunities that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
In normal workshops, people will get up and say, here's what I think, and the next person will get up and say, here's what I think. And what we have here in REIL is the ability, like we had today, to have people from India say to people from the US or people from China say to people from the EU, here's the policy we're experimenting with and what do we think's happening. So there's actually, through the knowledge, respect, and affection, there's room for dialogue. There's room for creative discussion that doesn't usually happen at these kinds of workshops.
I suppose it's a collective group of people who have a similar interest or similar belief that the energy future for us across this planet is going to be pushing energy efficiency and the development of renewables. And those two have been critical in the battle to stop climate change becoming a runaway phenomenon that does huge harm to the planet.
There are lots of conversations that happen, if you like, on the floor and around the edge that help form better views, better judgment about what is taking place in the world of renewable energy, energy efficiency, climate policy. And we have pretty frank exchanges.
I wouldn't say that it takes the politics and interests out. I would say it allows one to bring the politics and interests together in a way that may allow you to find new ways forward. If the politics and interests are just there to be defended, there's no opportunity to seek innovation.
The range of issues that renewable energy cuts across and the scale of the challenge when you bring in all of those various issues is really quite hard to get your head around, and it takes meetings like this where you bring in so many individuals across so many disciplines to be able to see the wood from the trees.
Very simply, stop waste, cut out excess energy consumption, excess water consumption, improve economic productivity for government, for companies, using resource efficiency as a driver of returns, ensure that the thinking and language around sustainability and energy and environmental investment is about opportunity. And then start to figure out why these opportunities aren't being taken. Why is it governments are wasting money on energy? Why is it that companies are wasting money on energy? If resource efficiency is a source of competitive advantage, why aren't those opportunities being taken?
You really need to combine the use of power in the public interest with finance, including, of course, mostly private finance, and technology. You need the three to work together to have any real hope of making a change. It's not always the case that you know what the right sequence is. The combinations can happen in reverse order. Sometimes the technological breakthrough inspires a change that takes place in finance and public policy. Sometimes it's the other way around, where public intervention is absolutely necessary to move a position, to create a space into which technology and finance can flow. So and it's not the same around the world, it varies from country to country. I happen to think that we can't make a systemic change without establishing a price for carbon, one way or another, regulation, tax, or a market mechanism. I think that's essential. But some of the other areas are so complex, the interrelationship between food security, water security, and energy security is so complex that you need a systemic approach before you can do anything sensible, and that won't be carried by a single policy mechanism. Often it's the case that it's our governance structures that are weakest. Even when we have good public policy, its implementation is often poor. And that's the case even in a country like the UK, where there's been a high level of awareness and public policy commitment to climate change over many years, but we still haven't made a big difference to the way money flows into the economy. It's still very heavily concentrated on fossil fuels. So there's no blueprint. but the elements are quite universal, and they are combining public policy, finance and technology in ways that are positive and optimistic. We aren't going to get close to solving this problem if what we offer is merely fear, pain and perfect people to respond to these messages. Then that's not going to happen.
For myself personally, I think it's in the financing world. I mean, yes, there's a whole lot of stuff that the political system needs to do, support measures and so on that need to be got right. But I think that probably needs to be done in conjunction with the creation of the right sort of financial instruments, with the marrying of long-term pension fund investments, for example, with sort of long-term investments we need to make in infrastructure and grids and so on. And I think so while there's always a lot of tension on the political process, I think if that can be combined, or if we get the financing element of it right, then I think it will. That's probably the key metric that needs to be worked on in the next couple of years.
We actually coined this phrase, we're looking for TLC, transparency, longevity and certainty in policy making. I'm a little bit hopeful that we'll move from this almost never-ending chorus of, government, 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 to, hang on, we're now finding lower costs, we're finding financing solutions, and we're finding a way for the private sector to make this a very economic proposition. However, having said that, at least for the next 5 and probably 10 years as we get into that transition, these policies to encourage deployment, to encourage research and development, they're still very important. And again, we just say make sure they've got lots of TLC, don't keep changing them, don't keep chopping them around, and make sure you know what you're doing when you enter into them.
The assistance that the developed world gives the developing world, if we can make sure that all has a decent, holistic energy solution in it, and energy I think includes water and in a way education. If that can all come together in the aid that's provided, or the loans that are discounted ultimately to be forgiven, that's a good way to impact kind of the base of the pyramid, and hopefully have a greater impact on the whole world.
A market which has got a carbon price in it. One way or another, if we're trying to reduce carbon's an externality, nobody's charged for it before, you've got to bring that into the argument. But that's not going to be enough. You've got to have interventions, you've got to have support systems which are going to bring new technologies and new approaches up to the point where you can say, okay, you're on your own now, all we need is a general carbon price and ordinary market dynamics, and this ought to prosper.
In the great discussions we've had, we must realize that we are not looking for engineering solutions or science solutions to this problem. It is as much about power relations, it's as much about identity, it's as much about who we are. So we must not remove the human element and totally absorb ourselves with the engineering part of it. We must bring the human being back on the table, and he must be the reason why we are seeking a solution.
What else is the British government, or indeed any other government, going to do to produce a sustainable energy supply for its population if it's not going to address waste? That's the first starting point of that policy, and particularly where and if there are opportunities for efficiency gains, productivity, economic gains, profit, then it makes a huge amount of sense. If you then translate that into the developing world, look at China, look at the growth of the energy services sector, look at the growth of the technology businesses and the valuations being achieved in Hong Kong stock market now for technology companies that can reduce the amount of energy used in buildings, that can apply heat recovery processes, LED lighting. These are massive growth industries, and let's just not forget the overall context in which we're working. Energy and water are the biggest industries in the world. We should be able to make money out of this.
I think the most immediate opportunity that we should figure out how to leverage is how to accelerate the transfer of coal-fired power to gas-fired power in the United States. If the United States is going to be so slow at adopting a combination of technologies, that is the one thing that could rapidly slow our greenhouse gas emissions. And we have a lot of installed capacity that desperately needs replacement. About half our load capacity in the United States could be replaced.
There's lots and lots and lots of information coming out. There's lots and lots and lots of work being done by venture capitalists in Silicon Valley or wherever. But public policy hasn't really got there yet. We're still sort of making projections about the future of renewable energy vis-a-vis fossil fuels based on relationships in the past, rather than based on a full understanding of what's happening and what could happen in the future. So I think that's actually the most important thing that you need, the opportunity you need to grab hold of, to achieve a harvest, only a temporary one because it'll keep on growing, of all the new ideas in the different fields that are now looking at this and which just weren't there 10 or 15 years ago. I'd love to know more about the real possibilities associated with algae. I think that unfortunately, it's the sort of area where only experts can really say what the potential is, and not many economists can then try to work out ways of putting that potential into effect. But if what only half of what some people interested in that area are saying is right, then we do have a very, very interesting potential new area of renewable technology. But I say that this year, next year, out of the venture capitalists may come some other sort of area. And you can get sick of it, you sort of say, oh yeah, well, that's this year's fad, what's next year's going to be? But some of these fads have got to work, otherwise we're all in deep trouble.
You know, I'm a little pessimistic about the financial sector because I don't see, at least in India, where I come from, I don't see enthusiasm in banks and financial institutions in funding technology, simply because there is a risk. Technology is still evolving. So I think the financial sector has to be more pioneering. And when we talk about innovation, I think there has to be financial innovation as well. And, you know, again, the mindset. The banker's mindset needs to change, and they must realize it's a whole new world. And the typical mortgage finance and typical external commercial borrowing models may not be applicable in the case of climate technologies. Maybe longer repayment terms, maybe lower interest rates, maybe some lease options. They will have to find some innovative ways of financing actual projects on the ground. Technology, yes, great scope. I think climate provides, or at least the climate discourse, either ways, whether you believe in the fact that it's changing or not, this entire momentum offers innovators, technologists, social scientists, policymakers, reasons and a compelling argument to change, to invest in education, to invest in basic education. You cannot create Albert Einstein unless you have a primary school in India. So this probably provides India, for example, an argument to create a primary education and a higher education system that is lacking, so that you could create inventors and discoverers of tomorrow. I think climate provides us a great opportunity, and this whole discourse on climate today offers governments a reason and offers them an argument to take back to the people, to reallocate resources and time on issues which were up till now neglected.